results. We saw a lot of crime reduction across the city. There's a new plan, or would you call this an updated plan for the next year?
Absolutely. It definitely is an updated plan.
So what is different in this plan? Can you explain some of the updates? And were there things you learned last time around that helped you put this one together?
Absolutely. If the public takes a look at the plan, you'll see at the back we have some metrics, and those are from things that we learned over the past year. We also looked at what we faced last year and added a couple really small changes, focusing on juvenile crime, something that not just here in Phoenix, but I think we've seen throughout the valley, an uptick in juvenile crime that we saw last year, and then really focusing in on the crime and disorder that's related to the fentanyl epidemic. We have to make sure that we're concentrated on that.
Well, I know you've had to be creative with what you're doing. Some of the investigators, can you talk about that as well? Because you hired a bunch of investigators that are civilians. Many of them were previously in law enforcement, but they're doing some of the legwork in investigations. How is that working out, and is it helping to solve a lot of these crimes and make arrests?
It's been very, very significant. Matter of fact, we just did another round of hiring. We're going to have close to 70 civilian investigators in the Phoenix Police Department, and they help detectives because, to be perfectly honest, with this reduction, we've had to shift a lot of those investigators out into patrol. So our detective ranks aren't what they were a few years ago, and without those 70 civilian investigators, we would be in a much different situation. They definitely help us be able to clear crimes.
When you look at the number of people that are hired to do this, I was so amazed at the number of people that jumped at the opportunity. These are people with a lot of qualifications in this world, many of them with law enforcement experience. How many people applied for these jobs? Do you have a number?
I know initially it was well over 500 or 600, and we had just did another recruitment and had hundreds of people put in for these positions.
Let's address what staffing also is a challenge to training, because if you need boots on the ground, it's hard for them to train. I was recently, I was driving on a Saturday morning. I happened to be driving east on Thomas Road from the 51, and up ahead was a Phoenix police with the lights on. Didn't think anything of it. And as we approached there, helicopter overhead, lights coming from all different directions, and we actually literally drove through a scene as it was unfolding. I don't know that many people understand the moving parts that happen in a critical incident like that. How do you train your officers in continuing education, de-escalation, things of that nature, and keep the number of officers you need on the street?
We have to be focused, and we use overtime. That's one of the things that we have to use to be able to operate a police department when we're as short as we are. With that being said, we can't skimp on training. Training has to be a focus. It has to be something that we don't slip on. And we've got a number of training programs that we're doing right now, pulling people offline regularly. But it just takes planning and scheduling.
Let's talk. We were talking earlier about staffing and how all of this plays out. Traffic is another piece of this. There's a new traffic plan. But as you look at this new crime reduction plan, what do you think? How do you think it's going to play out? With the statistics you saw, are we going to continue to see a reduction in crime?
That's what our scorecard is. That's what we judge ourselves by every day, and that's why we set goals. And we didn't hit our goals last year. We asked for a 5% reduction in violent crime. We got a 4% reduction. I think I've challenged the team again to go for another 5% in violent crime and 8% in property crime, and I think we'll get there.
Let's talk about the coordination with other agencies, both federal and local, because you can drive from Phoenix to Glendale or Phoenix to Scottsdale, and unless you see a sign, you don't even know you're in a different city. So it would seem like you have to have a very good coordinated effort with the other agencies. How is the relationship with the agencies around the valley, including the federal ones?
Incredible partnership that we have with our other law enforcement agencies. Just got back from Washington, D.C. on a trip. I was there with the Glendale chief and the ATF SAC here local, and police chiefs from around the country talking about gun crimes. And then, just East Valley, West Valley chiefs. I can't tell you, they welcomed me when I first got here, and I've built a strong relationship with all of them as we've gone through. And then, one of my former assistant chiefs is now down there in Chandler, so I've got a strong connection with Chief Chapman.
I want to wade into this. This may be the shortest conversation of the morning. The DOJ investigation, I'm not trying to make light of it, but this has been going on for the longest time, and I know you have a lot of experience with this area. Are you surprised by the length of this investigation with no word from the DOJ?
Yes.
See, I knew it was going to be a short one. I just knew it. Can you give us any insight? Has there been any conversations or insight into when something is coming, what they're thinking, and what might happen, or has it just been silence?
The last request we got, I believe, was for any information was back in February. So, asking, the DOJ will present something when they present something. So we'll continue to do this work to focus on what our job is.
Well, I know that you have dealt with this, and for the people that don't know about Chief Sullivan, he has been with multiple agencies in the country, but a lot of it is because of your expertise in dealing with consent decrees. But Louisville, Baltimore, and possibly here in Phoenix, but Phoenix has already said they don't believe they need a consent decree. Is part of these things like this crime reduction plan, are these the evidence that Phoenix is a self-assessing, self-correcting agency?
I think that's something we always strive for. When I got here, I said we need to be a department to really look inside ourselves and not wait for somebody else to point out things that we can improve on. And that's a continual process, and then correct it. I can point to a number of things that we've done since we've been here over the last couple of years, and things that happened even before I got here. And we'll continue to do that and stay connected to the community and continue to acknowledge that we're only as good as our community supports us.
One of the first things we talked about in this conversation this morning was officer safety because of the attacks on officers recently. But we have had a conversation in the past about how different your use of force policy is in the changes that were being made. And it's not an email that's going out. It's going to be hands-on training for everybody involved. How is that going? Is that training done? Has it been implemented? And how do you think that it's working?
Yeah, so I'm getting positive feedback on the training. We've got, I believe the last report I got, about 1,800 sworn officers trained in the new use of force policy. Hopefully we'll have it done by before Q4 this year, and then be able to implement that policy. And that's the right way to do it. And, I also always want to talk about how we took public input when we did this, put this policy out. It's not just something that we looked at internally and said, hey, this is the way it needs to be. We took input from the public and from our members to make sure that we had something that was Phoenix unique.
Can you give, I don't know how much you want to give away, the insight into that? Because I know for you concern about officer safety, especially what you're seeing, that the officers have to have the ability to protect themselves and the public. How do you balance use of force appropriately and that training with an officer being stabbed at a QT with absolutely no provocation in a surprise attack? What's the balance when you go into writing that policy?
The balance is making sure that we're inserting ourselves where we need to, following case law, but also making sure that, at the end of the day, we want the public to go home safe, and we want officers to go home to their family safe, and making sure that we give them the tools and the training to be able to do that. So it's really that balance.
Chief Sullivan joins us in the Phoenix Police Department, and I would say that I don't think most people understand. My brother being a cop, having some insight into that, watching how police officers work, they generally are responding to whatever is in front of them. If you're civil, if you're polite, if you're cooperative, it is a very good professional interaction. But your officers have to be willing and able to react to whatever they're confronted with. If it's belligerence, if it's violence, they have to be able to react. Do you believe that your officers are trained at best to handle all of those situations?
Our officers are put in situations that are incredibly difficult every single day. And 99% of the time, you never hear about it because they perform absolutely incredibly. That less than 1% of the time that things go viral or if something happens, we're going to deal with that. We're imperfect. We are not a perfect agency, but we can be proud of the men and women of the Phoenix Police Department, what they do every day.
Last question is about recruiting. I know that you've had a big recruiting push, especially for female officers, female recruits. What is the prospect? What can Phoenicians expect for recruiting classes and additions to the Phoenix Police Department in the next year?
what I would encourage every Phoenician to do is, if you have somebody that wants to be part of law enforcement, sworn or professional staff, we have opportunities. And if you're willing to serve, and if you're willing to be able to go out and be part of this incredible, noble profession, I encourage you to either step forward yourself or steer people our way, because we need you.
And is your recruiting, is it as good as you had hoped it would be? Or expected it to be? Not, it couldn't be as good as you would hope it would be. Are you getting the recruits you expected? Are you getting the growth you expected to get?
And I would say no. When I got here, I sat down with our folks in recruiting and said, I need classes of 35. I'm getting classes at 23, 24. So we need to expand the size of the classes. And like I said earlier, we're holding steady, but we need more.
Chief, I always appreciate the time. I think it's important for the city to know what to expect from the police department. You've always been so candid, and I appreciate the time.
No, thanks, Mike.
All right, that is Chief Sullivan for the Phoenix Police Department.
Thanks for watching the Mike Broomhead Show. Catch up on Amazing Arizonans, a KTAR News podcast, and click the button in the middle to subscribe.